Okay, so we're going to start on looking at Chapter 13, which is the first homework section for Section 3. So I'm in Chapter 13. You have 4 questions, and we'll go over a few things before we actually look at the questions. So I just wanted to point out a few reminders. So quickly, if we look at the document here, just a quick reminder how economists versus accountants define profits. It's real important when you're doing this section of homework that you think about that. So remember, profits are defined as total revenue minus total costs, and both accountants and economists, that's how they define profits. However, the way they actually determine the total cost is quite different. So a quick reminder, the accountant will only look at costs that are what we call explicit, meaning that they're direct monetary payments. So, for example, somebody works for you for 4 hours, and in return for their work, you pay them some money. It's a direct monetary payment. Economic costs, when they look at costs, they also include the explicit costs, just like the accountant does, but they also add on an additional type of cost, which we call the implicit cost. And those are costs that do not involve direct cash outflows or cash payments. So for example, if you gave up a $50,000 job, the economist would want to include that as a cost while the accountant wouldn't. So remember, that causes the interpretation of profits from an economist standpoint to be quite different than an accountant's. Couple other little terminology that you'll see in this part of the homework. When they say extra output, that's going to mean our marginal product. Remember, that's your extra output. When you see extra cost, that's referring to marginal cost. And opportunity cost, the way they word it is what is given up to get something, or they use the word acquire. So opportunity cost is something that's given up to get something or to acquire something. And lastly, quick relationship reminders between marginal and average. Take a quick look at that. Remember, if your marginal or your extra is going up at a quicker rate or is larger than your average, it's going to drive up your average. So like the GPA example we did, if your extra grade is an A in the class and your average had been a B average, your average overall would be driven up. If your marginal extra grade you get is the same as the grade point average or average that you came in with, let's say you started with 3.0 and you get a B in the class, which is also a 3.0, your average wouldn't change. And then if your marginal or your extra is less than your average, so you came in with a B average but you then get a C in the class, that's going to drive down your average. So you'll want to think about all of these terms as we go through these homeworks in Chapter 13. Okay, so we'll start with the first question in Chapter 13. I'll open that up. And this set of questions are just where it's really more definition. So I think with that quick review that we just did, I don't think you'll have any trouble answering the questions from here. Profits equal total revenue minus, and then you'll click on this and then you'll select. So I'll give you the first one. It's a nice and easy one, it will be to your total cost. So you'll just go through and do that for each one. So if I were you, I'd read the sentences a couple times before you select your answer. Let's move on to the second question. All right. So the second question, based on what we just did, I think you'll actually, the review, I think you'll be good here too. So this is talking about your aunt, in this case, opening a hardware store. It's estimated it will cost $300,000 per year to rent the location and buy the stock. So that $300,000 would be considered the explicit cost. And then it says, in addition, she would have to quit her $45,000 per year job as an accountant. So that would be the implicit cost. So remember that difference between how accountants and economists define those things. So the first part of the question is asking what's the opportunity cost. I think you'll be able to get that if you go back over the review on how we defined what opportunity cost is. And then I'm just going to caution you on this particular question. This question is asking your aunt's opportunity cost of running a hardware store for a year. So what you're going to do there, because of the way they're interpreting this in this particular question, I'm just going to tell you, you are going to include both the explicit cost plus the 45,000 job to find that cost right here. So that's the number that you'll put here. And then that is the number you will use to determine whether or not, you know, it would make sense for your aunt to open the store or not. Okay, let's go on. Okay, so the first part of the question, I've just taken the chart that's given in the homework, and you're given the number of hours, so in this case the variable input, a number of hours, and then your total product, which remember represents your output. And you're asked to complete the column for marginal product. So remember, your marginal product is the extra product or extra output that's produced when you change whatever this variable input is. So in this case, it's number of hours. You never have a number on the first line where there's 0. You know, you have nobody's working, so nothing's produced. There's nothing to compare it to. So I always just like to put an X there, so I remember that there's no particular change here. But then what we're going to do is we're going to move down. So we're going to look at how much does output change from 0 to 1. So the output changes by 10, and we divide it by the change in the Q, which again is the hours. So that was a 1, so 10. We'll just do a couple here. Then when we go from working 1 to 2 hours, we're going to get marginal product as the difference between what we had at 10 and how it changed. So it went from 10 to 19, so the change was 9, divided by the incremental change of 1 hour, which is 9. Sorry. And what you'll do is you'll just continue going on with this chart, and once you have your numbers here, I'm going to go back to the actual homework question, and you will plot, you will then take the information you found here, and you're going to plot, well actually you're going to use your total product here, sorry, and because it's asking you for your total product curve, so that's the production function. So it's the hours spent fishing down here, and then this is going to represent the total product. So you'll again use your mouse, right click, and then for example 0 hours we get 0 units of output. And let's just do another one. If we have workers working 1 hour, we would get 10 units of fish. So for 1 hour we would then put this kind of, it will show you when you're at 10, and then you'll just keep going, and then you'll answer these questions here. Okay, so continuing on, the next part then starts giving you a little bit more information. So what you're doing, you're taking the information that you were giving about production, the quantity of fish in pounds, which is what we were doing in the previous part of this question, but now we're turning this into costs. So in order to do that, you have to be given some information, which you are. So here you're told the fisherman has a fixed cost of $8. So whether he produces or she produces 0 pounds of fish or 1,000 pounds, the fixed costs are 8. And then the opportunity cost, or what's a he here, of his time is $4 per hour. So that would be the variable cost. So if we go back to that Word document I've been using, I've already put in some information here. So we know the number of hours, that was in the previous question. We know the output that was produced. So in order to get our costs, we take the information we were given. So we were told $8 in fixed costs, $4 per hour. So to get total costs when we produce nothing and we put no hours in, it would be $8 plus 0 for the variable costs. And again, remember, total costs are always equal to total fixed costs, one and only place at an output of 0, because we don't have any variable costs. for 1 hour of work, we can get output of $10. So our costs given the information we have would be the $8 fixed cost plus $4 for each hour. So we only have the 1 hour. So 4 times 1 would be 4. So 8 in fixed plus 4 in variable is 12. And we would just keep on going down to complete the chart. And then from this information, we would now be able to plot our total cost curve. And you're just going to use, click on using your mouse and then put the little place. So for example, the first point would be at 0 units of output, we would have $8 in costs. And you would just keep going. And then you would answer the question. Just a reminder, I will just tell you, the total cost curve is a convex. As far as the other part of that, you should be able to answer that question. Okay, question number 4. So going on to question number 4. So at first it might seem to be a little bit overwhelming. You have this big huge chart, and then you're asked to fill out the chart. It really isn't too bad. It's good practice to get used to what's marginal product, total cost, marginal cost, and average total cost. So I'm going to go back to that Word document to help us with this. So what I have done, I'm going to scroll down to our question number 4. And I've just taken the information that you've been provided in that homework question, and then we have these other columns that you're to fill out. So you're to fill out your marginal product, your total cost, your marginal cost, and your average total cost. And you have been told what your fixed costs are. So remember, fixed costs are those costs that you pay whether you produce 0 or 100 units or 7 or whatever. It's always that. Those are fixed. And then your variable costs. So in this case, they're telling you you're paying the workers $60 per day. So in order to do this, we would just start with the first column, which is marginal product. So we're going to take a look at how does our output change when we go from 0 to 1 worker. So remember, at 0, we're not going to have anything here. And then the incremental change from 0 to 1 worker, the output changed by 15, and you divide it by 1, so that would be 15. Let's do one more. From 1 to 2 workers, our output went from 15 to 40, so the change there was 25. The incremental change here was 1, so that would be 25. And you would just keep on going down the line. For total cost, you're just going to, fill in the information based on what you were given. So your total cost would be the fixed cost, 120, plus the variable of 60 per day, but we're not doing anything. We're not hiring anyone, so that would be 0, which would equal $120. Let's do one more. Here, for 15 units of output, our costs would be the 120 in fixed plus the variable cost, so we would have 1 worker making that $60, so plus $60 would equal, 180. And then continuing over, we would do our marginal cost and we would do our average cost. So marginal cost at 0 and average cost, I always just like to put the X's there. Well, we're not going to have anything. We'll start over here. So incremental change, remember, is marginal cost. So it's how much do our costs change? So remember, this is now cost. So we're going to use this column here for cost. So how much does the cost change when we change our output? So in this case, this is based on output changes. That's what the Q represents over the cost. So from output of 0 to 15, our costs went from 120 to 180, so this would be 60, divided by the change in our output, which would be 15, which would equal Okay, so this would be 60 over 15, and if we divide that out, that would be 4. And let's do another one. Actually, let's quickly do the total cost here. So for total cost, it would be 120 plus it's $60 per day, or per day for each worker. So there's 2 workers now, so that would be plus 120. So that would be total cost of 240. So in order to get the marginal cost, you take how much the cost change from here to here. So it goes from 180 to 240. Let me put that on one line. And that would be a change of 60 again, but this time the output increase would be 25, so that would equal 2.4. And you would just keep on going down the line for figuring out total and marginal. And then for average, we would just take our total cost, so in this case it would be 180, and we would divide it, again, the Q for costs, we'd be using output and divide it by 15. And you would keep on going down the line.